We want to warn you now, this next story is disturbing. A British nurse has been found guilty of killing 7 newborn children and attempting to murder 6 more. Those deaths took place between 2015 and 2016.
In the quiet halls of a hospital, where hope and life should begin and flourish, why would a nurse, trusted to care for the most vulnerable, became the last face these newborns would ever see? Please subscribe to our channel for more true crime documentaries. There's always a new story. Make sure you don't miss it. Lucy Letby, a woman sworn to save lives, stands accused of ending 7, perhaps more, innocent lives. How could a compassionate caregiver become the very monster she was meant to fight? The truth will shock you. This is the chilling story of Lucy Letby, a neonatal nurse at the Countess of Chester Hospital, whose shift in the nursery brought not healing, but death. 7 babies dead, 6 others barely escaping the same fate. What led a once trusted healthcare worker down such a horrifying path? And how did she fool an entire medical team? Until it was too late.
Neonatal nurse Lucy Letby was accused of killing the babies by overfeeding them with milk and injecting them with air and insulin. UK Health Secretary Steve Barclay is now launching an independent inquiry into the case. Joining us now from London with more is CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tayeb. Imtiaz, this sounds like the backstory of misery, truly horrific. We should say that the nurse denied the allegations. How did prosecutors connect her to the deaths?
Lana, good to talk to you. Yeah, this is obviously a very disturbing story. As we've been saying, Ms. Letby has been convicted of 7 counts of killing newborns and the attempted killing of 6. There are 22 charges in total. She was convicted of 16 by this jury, which deliberated for 22 days. Now, to answer your question of how the prosecution really came at this case and tried to really kind of present this really dark and disturbing allegations against this neonatal nurse.
Lucy Letby, born in 1990, began her nursing career at the Countess of Chester Hospital in 2012. From the start, she was dedicated to the tiniest and most fragile of patients. Newborns, some barely clinging to life, others facing severe challenges just to survive. As a neonatal nurse, her job was to nurture and protect. Nurses are supposed to save lives. But what happens when they become the ones who takes them away? Over time, a pattern emerged. An alarming, horrifying pattern that could no longer be ignored. Unexpected deaths and medical emergencies began to plague the neonatal unit at Countess of Chester Hospital, coincidentally, always when Lucy Letby was on shift. Babies, fragile, innocent, were dying under her watch. She was kind. She was the one you'd want looking after your child. So many families remember her gentle touch, her caring words. But as the days passed, something didn't feel right, says one colleague. The very nurse they trusted might have been their worst nightmare. It wasn't just the deaths, another nurse adds. It was the way Lucy seemed unfazed. No tears, no questions, just a strange calm, almost like it didn't affect her. It didn't sit well, but no one spoke up until it was too late. Why were so many children dying while under her care? Was she framed by her coworkers? Or was it simply a coincidence? The neonatal unit was meant to be a sanctuary, a place where the most fragile lives were given a chance to survive and thrive. But for the babies in the care of Lucy Letby, the hospital became a place of terror. Over the course of 2 years, between 2015 and 2016, a chilling series of events unfolded within the hospital walls. What appeared to be isolated incidents, tragic losses of vulnerable infants, were in reality connected by something far more disturbing.
Well, essentially, at one point from 2015 to 2017, there was a series of deaths in this neonatal unit. And that, of course, caused an awful lot of alarm from those inside that hospital. Now, Ms. Letby was described as somebody who was present at all of these deaths and at all of these periods in which these children were suffering so terribly. But there's one other crucial bit of information here. Yes, there was a lot of attention on her and focus on her. We have to remember she was first taken into custody back in 2015, but was still able to work in that hospital until 2017.
The victims, infants referred to only as babies A through Q, were predominantly premature and in delicate health. Their survival depended on expert care. Yet one by one, they fell victim to a series of unexplained medical emergencies. A sudden collapse, a rapid decline, life slipping away just as quickly as it had been given. At first, each death seemed like a tragedy, one that could be attributed to the unpredictable nature of premature birth. But as the body count rose and the circumstances began to echo one another, a pattern began to form, one that was impossible to ignore. The methods used to kill were disturbingly varied, each more insidious than the last. Air embolisms, excessive amounts of milk force-fed into tiny bodies, insulin overdoses. Each death was different, yet it all happened when Nurse Lucy was on duty, the nurse who was supposed to be protecting these children, not ending their lives. Letby's first method of choice, air embolism, was a technique so precise that it could only be carried out by someone with a clinical understanding of anatomy. She injected air directly into the baby's veins, a fatal block that would stop blood from flowing to the heart, brain, and organs, causing immediate collapse and death. It was swift, almost invisible to the naked eye, a cruel trick that gave no outward signs of harm until it was too late. Then there was the overfeeding, a seemingly simple act that resulted in deadly consequences. Letby would feed these tiny newborns an excessive amount of milk, far beyond their fragile capacity. The resulting complications were catastrophic: bloating, severe digestive issues, and eventual heart failure. To the outside world, it might have looked like an accident, a sad misstep in the unpredictable care of sick infants. But to those who investigated, it felt like a deliberate choice. The third method, insulin poisoning, was particularly calculated. Letby overdosed the babies with insulin, an amount so great it caused a sudden drop in blood sugar, a condition known as hypoglycemia. The infants would slip into a dangerous state, their bodies unable to function as their glucose levels plummeted. What should have been a careful and precise practice of administering insulin became an instrument of death in the hands of a trusted nurse. What was clear as the investigation progressed was this: Lucy Letby was always there. She was present during each critical incident, during each death, each collapse. She was the one who found the babies in distress, who called for help, who documented the tragedy as though she were merely a witness, not the cause. How did this woman, so seemingly invested in her role as a nurse, become the source of such horror? Did she know the parents of the babies she killed? Was she connected to them in one way or the other? It was almost as if she had been there, at the scene of every death, with a hand in each baby's demise. Could it have been mere coincidence that Letby was always on duty when these babies fell victim to such traumatic events? But the question that haunted investigators, and continues to haunt all who hear this story, is this: what could drive a nurse, sworn to care for life, to harm the very infants she was entrusted to save? But even as the bodies of the babies were taken away, the mystery deepened. What started as a string of seemingly unrelated tragedies was now unfolding into a chilling and deliberate killing spree.
But when investigators entered her home, they found a piece of paper where she had written, "I have done this."
Oh my
Lana.
gosh. Imtiaz, what type of sentence is she now facing?
So the way it works here in the UK is that her sentencing hearing will be on Monday, and that's when we will find out just what she will be sentenced for. But again, here in England, under English law, she will likely face life in prison, and that's really going to be the extent of it, despite the horrific nature of her crime. We have to remember that not only is she responsible for the deaths of 7 infants, she's also considered the most prolific child killer in Great Britain. So this, of course, again, a very disturbing case. And although the families of those very small infants who were killed by her will be reading out victim impact statements in court on Monday, it is likely that Ms. Letby will not be present. Here in the UK, there are measures in place in which those who are convicted of crimes are allowed to not attend hearings where victim impact statements are read out. That, of course, is hugely controversial here in the UK. Of course, this case involving a woman considered the most prolific serial killer of children in British history.
Imtiaz, thank you.
The investigation into Lucy Letby started small. One of the first pieces of evidence that raised alarm came from an unexpected source, Letby's own home. Investigators discovered handwritten notes tucked away in her personal belongings. These notes, chilling in their content, included phrases like, "I am evil. I did this." Were these confessions? To the investigators, they seemed like an admission, a glimpse into the psyche of a woman who had betrayed the very profession she had sworn to. But the notes alone were not enough to build a case. The investigation turned to the one thing that could tie Letby directly to the deaths: the medical records. Alterations were found in the files of the infants who had died under her care. Key details had been changed, deleted, and in some cases, entirely fabricated. In one instance, Letby had removed critical information from a handover sheet, information that could have potentially saved a life. It became clear that Letby had not only been present at each death, but had actively worked to cover her tracks. The more investigators dug, the more they realized that these were not mere mistakes or errors in judgment. These were deliberate attempts to conceal the truth. As the case progressed, witness testimonies began to paint a disturbing picture of Letby's behavior. Colleagues who had once seen her as a compassionate and dedicated nurse started to speak out. One described how Letby appeared unfazed by the death of a newborn, even offering strange and unsettling comments to the grieving parents. While other staff members were overcome with grief, Letby's response seemed different. She was calm, detached. One witness recalled Letby telling a parent, "I tried my best." Yet, there was no empathy, no sorrow in her voice. Just words, hollow and chilling. Was this the behavior of someone truly dedicated to her patients? Or was it the cold mask of a killer, hiding in plain sight? But how did Lucy Letby manage to evade suspicion for so long? The hospital staff's reluctance to question her was troubling. It wasn't until the deaths started to mount that the pattern began to emerge. Letby was always there when a crisis struck, always in the room during the most critical moments. And yet, for months, no one asked why. The revelations continued to shock the public as new details emerged from the investigation. Could there be more victims than the 9 initially believed? After years of mounting suspicion, Lucy Letby was finally brought to trial in 2023. The case that had gripped the nation, one that involved the mysterious deaths of vulnerable infants in a neonatal unit, was now in the hands of the court. What had once been whispers of tragedy now stood before a jury, waiting to determine whether a woman entrusted with life had instead taken it. August 2023 marked a turning point in one of the most horrifying cases in the history of the British healthcare system. After years of investigation, courtroom drama, and mounting evidence, Lucy Letby was finally convicted. 7 counts of murder, 6 counts of attempted murder. The reality of the verdict sent shockwaves throughout the medical world. A nurse, trusted by her colleagues and the families of the vulnerable infants in her care, had become a killer. For those who had followed the case from its earliest days, the conviction felt like the final chapter in a long and painful story. But for the families of the victims, the verdict only added another layer to their grief. Parents who had placed their newborns in the hands of a professional who swore to protect them now faced the unthinkable. That someone they had trusted with their child's life had, in fact, been the cause of their death. In the months following the conviction, experts and the public alike continued to question the case. Could Letby's conviction have been a miscarriage of justice? Or was the system finally working as it should, holding someone accountable for crimes that, for far too long, had gone unchecked? What remained clear was that Lucy Letby's case would continue to dominate discussions in medical circles, courtrooms, and homes across the world. The question of medical accountability, trust, and oversight had been laid bare, and the answers, it seemed, were not so easily found.